Meetings. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Wealth Management Advisory Club meeting. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for everyone who showed up to our Chili's fundraiser on Friday. I greatly appreciate it. We do have a couple announcements after the meeting, so please stay behind for that. But today we have Marguerita Cheng, or she likes to be called like Rita Cheng. Cheng, she's the Chief Executive Officer of Blue Ocean Global Wealth. She's also a CFP certified. So guys, please turn your cameras, ask questions. Please do this to make it as engaging as possible. With that, Rita, I will pass it over to you and we get this started.
Well, absolutely. Thank you so much for the introduction. So I created a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation here, and this is not death by PowerPoint. It's just for you to know a little bit about me. And there's no company logos on here. It's really about my financial planning journey. Because you're all hoping to enter the financial planning profession. So this picture, my kids tell me I look really sad here, and I do look a little bit sad. This is a picture of my, let me go back, sorry, a picture of my dad. And this is the first Christmas after my dad passed away. And this picture was actually featured in the New York Times, December 2015. And that is actually part of my financial journey. You know, my dad was born in China and came to America in the 60s. And when I skipped a couple steps. He was born in China, had to flee his hometown a couple times, went to Taiwan to serve in the military, pursue higher education, spent a little bit of time in Guam, and of all places in America, ended up in Wisconsin. And that's really relevant because my dad actually was sponsored by the Jesuits and studied applied mathematics at Marquette. And that's very interesting because back then a lot of people wanted to go to New York and wanted to go to California. So the reason why I'm telling you this is sometimes we may have a plan for what we should do, but sometimes we need to know that opportunity can present himself. So Dad took advantage of this scholarship. And this is, I know before I was born, I believe I was always destined to be a planner. But when I went to college, there weren't really that many financial planning programs. I studied finance and East Asian language and literature. So you see, this is calligraphy in the background. My Asian heritage is very important to me. And then these are some Japanese dolls that my mom made. So while my family has not been in America that long, I'm what we call generation 1.5. I'm straddling 2 generations. I truly believe that financial planning transforms lives, and you are all in an amazing profession. So I put this in here because I think it's important. I'm a little bit of an introvert. Who would have ever thought, like in college, I was just happy. I studied finance and East Asian language and literature. And my first job in finance was writing a newsletter for English-speaking investors. English is my first language. But I knew accounting and finance, and I knew how to read financial statements. I mentioned to you that my dad is Chinese. Why did I go to Japan? I went to Japan because they gave me opportunity to study in Japan, and then I worked as an analyst writing this newsletter. And I speak a lot about diversity and inclusion and representation in this profession. And so that is a snapshot from Asset TV, talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our profession. Diversity does make sense. And even building this presentation, I was like, gosh, I don't want to make it seem like it's so much about me, because it's really not. This article is from a long time ago, 2016. But someone asked me, why do I think diversity is important? And I believe that everybody benefits and can benefit from financial planning. And so that is like my why. I want everybody to have access to competent, ethical advice. I told you my heritage is very important to me. The other thing that's interesting is I'm a mom of 3 kids, and this is my youngest daughter. I need to switch this photo out, but I really like this photo because this is when she's still shorter than me. My daughter is 5'10" and wears size 11 shoes. But I think personal finance is personal, and people relate and connect with those that they like and trust. I put this in here because we talked about my nitro cold brew. I taught ethics for 2 hours earlier today, but matcha. This is matcha, Japanese green tea with steamed milk. And I drink matcha every day, and it kind of like centers me. I love my matcha. And I think as financial advisors, I use the term a little bit interchangeably here, but as aspiring CFP professionals, I want you to know that it's okay for you to share who you are. So you just heard in my short time that I'm proud of my Asian roots. I'm a mom of 3. I love matcha. What I stand for, equality, empowerment, and beauty. I know equality is a little bit different from equity, but I think it's a beautiful thing for everybody to be financially empowered and confident. And the other thing, so I told you a little bit about me, and then we'll give you some takeaways for your advice. I told you that I'm very proud to be a mom. I'm also very proud of supporting girls. I have a son, so these are my 2 girls. This is the older girl on the left, the younger girl on the right, and there's a son in between. I don't want you to be afraid to share what your hobbies and interests are. I coached girls on the run for 5 seasons, not because I think I'm a great runner. Believe it or not, when I was a kid, I hated running. I wasn't overweight. I just had asthma as a result of complications from childhood pneumonia. But the reason why I decided to coach girls on the run is my younger daughter wanted to do it, and there weren't enough volunteers. So I don't want you to be afraid of trying new things. I was like, I can't really run. They're like, don't worry, you just need to keep the girls safe and healthy. And so what I did is I coached for 5 seasons, and I ran with my daughter. Come to find out that I actually liked running, and I became quite good at it. So don't be afraid to try things that you're because the worst could happen is you don't like it. I'm going to be one of these speakers who's going to tell you it's just as important to try things and know you don't like them as it is to say and tell people what you like. So about as you like launch, I'm going to also dispel some myths. One myth is networking isn't effective. And I think it's important for us to understand that before we do anything, we need to think about what we're trying to accomplish. So at that networking event, do we think that we're going to get a job? And if we do think that we're going to get a job, maybe that's why we think it's not effective. So I want you to go into an event with a goal. I want to talk to 3 new people. I just say 3. I think that's why sometimes people think it isn't effective. They're putting so much pressure on themselves to talk to every single person. And I'm here to tell you that this information I'm sharing with you does work. I told you I'm a mom of 3 kids. My kids are getting older. I have my son and daughter, and my son graduated from college in 2020. Very difficult time. His diploma was mailed to him. He didn't get to walk. And sometimes kids don't listen. I mean, not all of us, we don't like to listen to our parents because they don't know anything. But I told my son, I was like, Christian, you need to just make sure that you're building relationships. And instead of thinking about networking, I just want you to think that networking is about connections and conversations. You just need to make some connections with people and engage in meaningful conversation. If you do that, then you may find it's more effective. Networking is a waste of time. That's another myth I'm going to dispel for you. It is a waste of time if you grab a bunch of cards and don't follow up. What's really key here is the follow-up. You don't need to go to an event and talk to 20 people. If you talk to one person having meaningful conversation, then it's worth it. I can't be a successful networker. I put myself here, and I'm going to share this story with you because this is really relevant. So this is me, and this is Dr. Wade Pfau. So in 2012, I was the FPA chapter president here in DC. 2013, I'm the chair, and we have a rule where the outgoing chair is responsible for planning the annual symposium the following year. So you can't say, see ya, hasta la vista, as president 2012, I'm out of here. 2013, you're a chair. And, you know, Dr. Wade Pfau, oh my goodness, he's an esteemed retirement researcher. I knew that the people in my chapter are members and sponsor with defined value. So what did I do? I reached out to him. I sent him an email introducing myself. I'm not selling anything. Of course, I know that I am selling him on coming to present to my chapter. But what I mean is he doesn't have to buy anything from me. He reached out to me and said, yes, Rita, I would love to present at your chapter. Dr. Wade Pfau also spent 7 years in Japan. He came to Japan just as I was leaving Japan. So I was like, you know what? That connection. I'm like, you know, we have something in common, Dr. Wade Pfau. Like, I was in Japan at this time, and I see that you've spent time in Japan doing this. So that was like our connection. He called me. I admit I was a little bit starstruck. That was in 2013. Here we are, that's 9 years later. And I've developed a friendship with him. Now, I spent a lot of time in Japan, right? 4.5 years, and he spent time. When I see Dr. Wade Pfau, I say, hi, how are you, Dr. Wade Pfau? He's like, Rita, you don't need to be so formal. You can call me Wade. So the key here is, yes, you can be a successful networker. Even someone like me who is a little bit introverted, you just need to have a plan. And my plan was not deceptive. I'm like, okay, I'm FPA chapter president. My job, now chair, is to get good speakers. So I wrote a sentence or two about our symposium, why I thought I'd be a good speaker. Lo and behold, he came and took me up on the offer. To the right, you'll see IMCA. This is before now it's called Institute of Wealth and Investment. That is a picture with the CEO. I developed a friendship with him because I delivered, you know, that ethics presentation I talked about. I delivered that ethics presentation to, it was called IMCA at the time, now it's IWI. And he said to me that I did a really good job, and he's invited me back 3 times. So what I'm telling you is, no matter what job is presented to you at this time, you know, give it your best. Give it your best, because you never know where that's going to lead you. Myth, quantity is most important. It's not about how many people you met or the number of business cards collected. Investing the time to develop friendships, as I showed you, is more value than exchanging business cards with 100 contacts. So remember I told you about my son. Now my son is a little bit resistant, but he did pull through. I told you he graduated in 2020 and 2021, could not walk. His diplomas were mailed to him. He asked his professors to write him a letter of recommendation. And they did. And I said to him, I said, Christian, you got to write thank you notes. Well, I don't know if I got in. I was like, it doesn't matter. You need to write a thank you note. People have a vested interest in your success. If you don't get it, you still need to thank them. If you do well, they're going to want to help you more. I'm here to tell you, my son started his research fellowship at the National Institute of Health, NIH. And this is also relevant because he just started August 1st. And he needs a professional recommendation because he's applying to grad school. And so I told him, I was like, you need to ask your supervisor. He's like, yeah, but I've only been working there 2 months. I was like, it doesn't matter. You need to ask him. Lo and behold, the supervisor said, yes, Christian, I'd be happy to write you a letter of recommendation. I don't want you to waste an application cycle. I understand you're a little bit young in terms of work experience, but I don't want you to waste an application cycle. I will write your letter of recommendation. If you don't get it, I just want to let you know that we will extend your research fellowship. So why am I telling you this? That even during the deepest, darkest days of the pandemic, my son's original internship in summer of 2020 was canceled. We couldn't work in labs. DC was hit pretty hard too with the pandemic. So I told him to invest the time in nurturing these relationships with professors. Networking defined, it's an exchange of information and services among individuals, specifically the cultivation of productive relationship or business. So networking, I know that's really formal. That's the official definition, but just want you to reframe it. It is really about connections and conversations. So when you connect with somebody, you converse. When you converse with someone, you build upon that connection. And why is it important to network? Of course, we're going to get into like this. I talked a little bit about, how my journey to the profession and why networking, and we're going to come back and allow time for Q&A. People will do business with those they like and trust. And people may be willing. Here's what I mean. When you're applying for your job, let's just say you don't know e-money financial planning software that well. However, if you've met an established advisor at industry events and you volunteered and you sent those thank you notes, I got to be honest, it doesn't really matter what you know. You've already proven that you're reliable, you're trustworthy. You stand a fair shot. Don't set yourself up for failure. You just have to give it your all. So that is why people will do business with those they like and trust. So I want you to know that it's important and certainly embrace for you to show a little bit about your personality, what you like. Body language, be like open, smile, when you're in a Zoom. People actually notice this about me. So at the end of the meeting, before you say goodbye, I smile for a little bit. Because within a few seconds, unfortunately, people do make judgments and assumptions. Networking, I can honestly say this, believe it when I say this. In college, we had to take Communications 107, that's speech. And I didn't like public speaking. I really didn't. I was so nervous. But what I realized is the reason why I didn't like public speaking is I was so afraid of being judged. But I realized that I'm the subject matter expert. It's not that I'm arrogant. Preparation is key. And if I prepare, I come across as more confident. So networking effectively does force us to go outside of our comfort zone. And I'm going to give you some strategies, and these work. So sometimes when you go to events, maybe you have a buddy or somebody that accompany, that way you're not alone. It's quality over quantity. But here's some questions as you go to industry events. You see someone's name tag. Tell me about your role. These are all open-ended questions. So remember, I'm an introvert. You ask the right questions. Tell me about your role at XYZ firm. What do you like most about San Jose? You're reading someone say, it's great to meet you. What session are you most looking forward to attending? What session have you enjoyed most? These are all open-ended questions. Listen intent with purpose. So that's what I tell people. I was like, what session are you looking forward to attending? And they'll say, I was like, oh. And so when you ask the open-ended questions, people like to talk about themselves. You don't have to think as much. And it's okay. You can focus all of your energy on what they're saying. It's important for you to develop your skill set, but also develop relationship capital. That's emotional intelligence. And part of emotional intelligence is being self-aware. So I recognize that I'm an introvert. Sometimes when I go to a conference, believe me, I'm very social, but instead of going to happy hour right away, I might go to my room, help my kids with their homework, answer email, and then go back down right for the dinner. I'm aware. I know that sometimes it's overwhelming. Or I might go to the gym and get a workout in. Social awareness. I know I'm an introvert, but I also know others when they're introverts. So I'm aware. I'll pull that person in the conversation so they don't feel overwhelmed. Self-management is the ability to use our awareness, to be flexible and use our awareness. So I've had people who've displaced their anger. Yes, it hurts. I would be lying if I told you otherwise. But understanding, maybe that person is not having a good hair day. I don't know what happened. So giving them the benefit of doubt. These are all really helpful, particularly as we're dealing with people and their money. Money is emotional, and people can be emotional about their money. So understanding that, maybe we wanted to go through the whole financial planning, but the client is feeling overwhelmed, breaking it down. Remember, we talked about how networking is a skill. It takes time, self-awareness, collaboration, empathy. When I meet people, I make sure that I follow up with them. And follow up can be, you can send a LinkedIn message and customize it. Just say, it doesn't have to be long and formal. Dear Marguerita, it was so great hearing you at X. I really enjoyed. Look forward to staying in touch. This is really easy. And I do this too. When I go to a conference, I read a lot. In fact, I'm just going to lift up my laptop and show you what I'm reading. So I'll raise it back up. I'm reading The Sweet Spot, Paul Bloom, Author Against Empathy. So another question you can ask is what have you been reading? Or if you're not a reader, what movies have you seen? What are you what are you watching these days? These are all open-ended questions. So definitely think about, what you like to read, what you like to do, what movies, music, whatever the thing. Mentorship. So mentorship, I'm going to talk a little bit about mentors and how they've helped me. Now, life is too short to learn all the lessons ourselves. You can have more than one mentor. And I just want you to know that you don't have to do everything your mentors say. I've benefited from 2 mentors, several, but 2 who have really stood out. And they were very they just happened. So I graduated from University of Maryland. And when I started at Ameriprise Financial, there was a senior financial advisor who also graduated from Maryland's business school. Come to find out, we were in the same fraternity, different generation. When he was on campus, it was just all male. When I was on campus, it was co-ed. It was co-ed service fraternity. So we had the Maryland connection from the business school. We also were fraternity brothers. I didn't ask him to be my mentor, but he kind of took me on. He had a vested interest in my success. And I know he was a little bit hard on me at times, but he's brilliant. I say but, and he's brilliant. So first he earned his CPA, then he earned his CFA, MBA, and CFP. He actually wrote test questions for the CFP certification exam. And he was hard on me, with asset allocation and financial plans, and he would make me redo them. And he did that because he cared. So I didn't ask him to be my mentor, but it was kind of, this just evolved. And he did contribute a role in my success. This is what he told me. He said, Rita, you need to join the professional associations. It's not enough to just pay your dues. You need to be involved in your profession. I did that, and he's right. I got involved with FPA. I was appointed to the board of the local financial planning chapter in 2007, just 3 years after I earned the marks. And I became director of membership. I'm not saying it to brag. I'm not saying this. It's a process. And then remember how I told you, you need to be really good at the role that you're in right now. And I was just perfectly content being membership director. We grew our membership to over 1,000 members. Someone asked me, I never saw myself as being presidential. They're like, do you want to be president? And I was like, well, sure. I was so honored that people looked at me as a chapter leader. And then another mentor. So you can have more than one mentor. That mentor that I shared about, that was at my firm, Ameriprise Financial. But then there was another mentor within the Financial Planning Association who invited me to serve on the board. This was in 2007. I know it's 15 years ago, but it's really material. He asked me to serve on the board of directors in 2007. Remember, I only passed the CFP exam in 2004. And I said to him, I was like, I'm really honored. I've only had the CFP marks for less than 3 years. What's the criteria to be membership director? And he's like, you just got to get one more member than last year. You'll be fine. And so I was so focused on being a good membership director. But then people saw the great job I did. because we grew membership. I built a committee. That's when people asked me to serve, on the executive track. So I became secretary in charge of pro bono, then treasurer, president-elect, and so forth. So the positive influence and guidance, the guy who reached out to me in 2007, he didn't care that I only had CFP marks for 3 years. It didn't matter to him. What mattered is I could talk to people, and even before he invited me to the board, I was a volunteer in the membership committee, and I recruited 11 people. So what I want you to know is I talk about this so much, that we need to respect experience, but we also need to embrace the energy and excitement that aspiring or freshly minted CFPs bring to our profession. I would not be here if that guy said, oh, you don't have enough experience. This is really key here. I had what he needed. He needed somebody who could talk to people and who could bring people together. It wasn't about my AUM or how much business I closed. Can you talk to people? Can you bring people together? So that's another key takeaway. Do not set yourself up for failure. Don't be like, oh, I don't have that much experience. Does not matter. We all have strengths and talents, and you have something you bring to the table. I talked about this a little bit because, I'm not going to be the type of person that's going to read slides to you. My mentor relationships developed on their own. You don't need, I think you only need, that is like, you don't only need. And mentors, so these are myths because it says realities of mentorship. Mentor relationships develop organically on their own. You can ask people to mentor you if you're comfortable with it. So myth is you only need one mentor at a time for success. That's not true. You can have several. Mentors do not need to be older than you. Mentorship is a huge investment time. That's not true. If you go to Twitter, there's a guy that met me 10 years ago. I make the time to meet people newer to the profession. He came to my office. He's in the profession. He actually gave me a public shout out on Twitter. I can't believe I met Rita 10 years ago. This is amazing. Mentorship is not a one-way street. I've learned a lot from my mentees, and I continue to learn. So I really want to make sure in our time together that I give you with clear, concise, actionable advice. I want all of you all to have a quality and professional headshot. This is really important. You can, I'm going to type in the chat here. You can Google my daughter's a little bit more receptive than my son, right? I told you my son is too cool for school. But my daughter, if you Google Serena's my daughter, you can see her LinkedIn profile. Her profile, when she was in college, her professor actually pulled up the profile. It's a good profile, meaning it's not so much out there. Could she do a little bit more with endorsements? Absolutely. But I just want you to take a look at a LinkedIn profile. Update your profile regularly. It's the largest professional network. Don't treat it like Facebook. I know people say it's Facebook for professionals, but what I mean is just be careful what you post. And I'm going to tell you something about LinkedIn. So when I was at Ameriprise, this was a while ago because I didn't leave until November 2013. We weren't allowed to post anything, but I was 100% compliant. I had to be connected to my compliance officer. So I was not allowed to post, but I still can be effective on LinkedIn. I'd congratulate people on promotions, job change. I remember if I went to a conference and I liked somebody, I could send a customized message. So what's key here is to emphasize quality over quantity. Don't avoid avoid sending a generic request. Even if it takes time to send something customized, 2 to 3 sentences, that's fine. It shows that you're paying attention and you care, and it stands out. We talked about when you network, follow up. So you can follow up with somebody via social media, like we talked about LinkedIn. You can email them. If that's appropriate, you can text them. Phone. This is huge here. Handwritten notes. People don't get a lot of correspondence. And I'm here to share another story about handwritten notes. Handwritten notes really work. I mean, my daughter has already graduated from college, but when she was a freshman. I told her to write handwritten notes to everybody. She listened to me. She wrote handwritten notes to even the office managers at her university. She was in a program called Scholars Program, and there's like the administrator. And I'm telling you, it's so important to write these notes. That note was still pinned on the bulletin board. And my daughter recognizes how important it is. She's like, people tell me that they still have my note. So if there's anything I want you all to do, remember, it's quality over quantity. Definitely take the time to write handwritten notes. People don't get a lot of correspondence these days. The thing that is huge is like the letters of recommendation. You know, even if you don't get the award or whatever, please still write a thank you note, because that's thanking someone for their time. And oh my God, if you win, definitely send them a thank you note. That makes them even prouder. They want to write more. They want to do more for you. I'm telling you, these thank you notes really pay off. Because there was one time, I'm telling you, talk about, you all are in school. There's a lot, so you're parents and you always fill out FAFSA every year. There's a period where I had 2 kids in college at the same time. And it was tough. Of course, I'm a planner, but it's still expensive. So there's need-based financial aid. There's merit-based financial aid, but there's another type of financial aid that I think, and of course there's athletic, but there's another type of financial aid that I think, the fourth kind, that people actually overlook, and that's interest-based. My daughter studied supply chain, and Supply Chain Society had some scholarships, and the university had some scholarships that are very specific for people studying supply chain. My daughter actually, this is, talk about a filter. You have to be studying business, you have to be studying supply chain. You know, writing these letters and being aware. Remember I told you about the faculty mentor? Said, hey, there's this scholarship you may want to know. It's not favoritism, she's just letting her know. She did win that scholarship. So you talk about the payoff, it was $5,000. $5,000 isn't a lot of money, but yet it is a lot of money. You think about, okay, how long did it take you over the course of your 2 years in college to write these thank you notes? Maybe you wrote 8 notes. You can do the math here. It's definitely good return on your time. Invest in yourself. Don't be intimidated by what you don't know. Be your greatest strength. So even if you're in a situation where someone says, hey, you know, you don't know this, you don't know that, agree with them. Say, you know what, I don't know that, but here's what I do know. But don't even say the word but. Acknowledge what they're saying. You're right. I don't know this. I am subject matter expert in X. If you don't want to say subject matter expert, don't say subject matter expert. You can use other terminology, but just hold on and stand behind what you know to be your strength. We all have strengths. And I put in here the Chinese bamboo. It takes time to cultivate these relationships, but it'll grow to reach the sky. And here are the key takeaways. And I'll tell a little bit more about myself, but I really wanted to allow time for Q&A. I think where I have been successful, and I have a hard time even saying I'm successful because I'm like really humble, you know, growing up in an Asian family, I was told, you know, put your head down, work, don't draw a lot of attention to yourself. Don't let others define success for you. Think collaboration and community, lifelong learning, be open and accepting, right? Support, mentor, advocate, and sponsor. Support your peers, mentor others, advocate yourself and others, and sponsor. Embrace your superpower. I told you my superpower is my ability to relate and connect. Yes, I'm really good at analysis. I can pretty much, you know, that book that came with your HP 12C or HP 10B? I went through the entire book. I studied finance in college. I knew how to do all those calculations. I wouldn't say that that is what's going to take me to the promised land. I am technically sharp. I can look through a financial plan and, you know, see where, maybe there might be an issue with the data inputs, but really my superpower is my ability to relate and connect with others. And my North Star, even when I have a bad day, people displacing their anger, my why. So I told you I studied East Asian language literature and finance. And I told you my first job was writing this newsletter on Tokyo Wall Street. I felt a little bit disconnected because I never had the opportunity to even know who are the people we're serving. My North Star is I believe everybody can benefit from competent, ethical financial planning. I wanted to take the concepts we learn in corporate finance, healthy cash flows, strong balance sheet, apply them to individuals and families. So that's my why. That's why I became a financial planner. I know that people might have thought, okay, well, you don't have a book of business, you don't have a natural market. It didn't matter. Like the first 2 years of the business, I know you all don't have to do this anymore, like making like cold calls. I might be dating myself, but people probably can do more on social. But the facts are, like, they weren't cold calls. They gave me like warm leads, and my job was to call them and get people to talk to me about financial planning. So that is the formal part of the presentation. Like I said, I really wanted you to have concrete takeaways, but I also wanted to allow time for Q&A, and I hope this is what you wanted.
Yes, this is definitely what we wanted. So does anyone have any questions to start, or anyone on Zoom, anyone in person, or?
I have a question.
Yes.
I know you said making connections was important and to focus more on quality over quantity. What's the best way, I guess, for a person like me to really make to start a conversation, like potentially make a connection with somebody?
So sure. So can you provide me a little bit context? Are you talking about a conference, talking about an FPA, a meeting with other people who are going to hire you? What's a little bit of the context?
I mean, I didn't have any scenario specifically in mind, but for now, let's go with I want to get a job somewhere in the finance industry.
So
I'm walking up to a potential employer.
So first thing that you can do is I want you to think about firms that you like, right? And then you are all in school, so you're allowed to do this. People love students. You do a little bit of research on the firm, and then you can reach out to see if they're hiring. If they're not hiring, ask if you can do an informational interview. You probably also have alum coming back to your school. This is another thing. This is actually where my kids are very different. Remember I told you my son is too cool for school. I think it's because he's an engineer. He's brilliant in his own way. I don't want to roll my son under the bus. He's very, very smart. My daughter graduated with a degree in business. She understands that she needs to connect and meet with people. So I would say the informational interviews. You can also look at alum from your school. Just say, hey, I see you're an alum. You graduated from the program. Do you have time for an informational interview? This one may not be, because you don't want to ask, are you hiring? Do you have time for an informational interview? Would it be okay if I had 15 minutes to learn more about your journey? My daughter, Mommy, you're never going to believe this. She calls me Mommy. I was like, what? She's like, I reached out to Jason, who studied supply chain and graduated 10 years older than me. And we had an hour Zoom call. He set aside an hour to meet with me. And I was like, yeah, you need to thank Jason for his time. My daughter didn't thank Jason for his time. Jason wants to help her even more. So I would say a good way is first look at firms, right? You can also look at alum, because it's also, they're alum. They're going to want to help their students. So I hope, was that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
And the other thing is if you go to a conference, because I know you're going to be going to conferences, if you don't want to pass out business cards, to be honest, I don't even have business cards. I don't even know what happened to them. Make sure you have a stellar LinkedIn profile. You can always connect with them. You can get their business cards, and then you stay connected. So I'd say that's really helpful. And then if you have the opportunity to go to a meeting in your community for financial planners, you can ask an open-ended question. Tell me about your firm. I guess that's not an open-ended question. but it's a statement. Tell me about your firm. Oh, they'll tell you all about their firm. So the key here is, building connection, just ask open-ended questions. And definitely the informational interview, people are always going to be nice to students. I mean, we were all students once. Thank you for the question.
I think there's a question in the chat here. Case comes from Leanne. How did you become the CEO of Blue Ocean Global Wealth?
Sure, I definitely can answer that question. So, I told you that I studied East Asian language and literature, and then I came back to America because this is also when the Japanese economy was slowing down. And I knew that I wanted to be a financial planner, but I had to have a plan. So at that time, I interviewed with, it was called American Express Financial Advisors, Prudential, and Merrill Lynch. And I received offers from all three. I did pick Ameriprise Financial because I liked how they focused on financial planning first. Prudential, yes, they did financial planning, but it was more, I liked how Ameriprise did lead with financial planning. And Merrill Lynch, this talk about being self-aware, right? I knew that that wasn't probably the right environment for me. So I worked at Ameriprise for 14 years until 2013. And then in 2013, I did create Blue Ocean Global Wealth, founder and CEO of this firm. In some ways, it was hard because it was starting over. I couldn't solicit the clients. I had to satisfy the cool down period, which I did. And then some people did follow me. But what's key here is I didn't really think about what I was leaving behind. I was thinking about the future and the opportunities that lie ahead. I like writing and speaking and creating CE programs. And that's like what Blue Ocean Global Wealth does. We first start with planning. If people want to hire us for assets under management, they can. Or if they just want to hire us for planning and manage their money themselves, they can. And then our other source of income and revenue is continuing education programs. So I love the profession, but I thought about what it is that I could do to create a firm where people didn't necessarily feel judged based on their experiences. So I created it.
No, all right. I'll ask my question. So, I usually ask questions because we have a couple of weeks ago, we had someone who was a CFP came on here, and I usually just ask, because even though I'm not a finance major, would somebody who's planning on going into the wealth management field, do employers look for CFP credentials, or do they look for CFA, or look for both? Because I've heard from other people who've come in our meetings, they said, we look for people to take a CFP exam, or we're on the other side of the coin, they may say, we want people to take the CFA exam. Like, what are employers looking for in the wealth management firm? Are they looking for CFP licensure or CFA?
So this is what I tell people, and this is me, and I've also seen this at the FPA chapter. So I didn't study financial planning as an undergrad. I studied finance and East Asian language and literature. When I joined Ameriprise Financial, when they make you an offer, you have a certain window to take your tests. And I took the Series 63, 65, 7 Life and Health. I'm a little bit crazy, but I'm also very focused. I passed all 4 tests in like 6 weeks. I had to, because at that time my kids were really little, like they were 3 and 6 months old. And what I did is I cashed out my annual leave. I am definitely a planner from my former employer. And I, during that 6 weeks, I was like at 100% pay. So my job was really to study, work out, and take care of my kid. So to answer your question, I think that what a lot of employers look for is they look for people who, yes, if you have CFP certification or you are a CFP candidate or a CFA candidate, that is going to be really very well received. But what really is more important is your story and what experience you have. I've known of people who've been able to secure a job that didn't pass the exam quite yet. They're a candidate. So it is true, if you're more portfolio management, CFA is probably going to be more on that track. If you more planning, CFP. But the fact that you haven't passed the exam or sat for the exam should not preclude you from, securing full-time employment. You can put on your LinkedIn or on your resume, your coursework. I think what is going to be really helpful is if you have experience using some of the software, right? That's huge, because a lot of older advisors, even older than me, they don't really get technology. It's not that they're old, it's just they are like, have other things they need to worry about. So if you can come in there and own the financial planning process and know about technology, that is going to be a huge win. I don't want you to, of course, if you have the CFP certification, if you can command a higher starting salary, but that not having that is not going to mean that someone is not going to hire you.
Thank you for that question. Anyone else, any other questions from Zoom, in person?
Yeah, I have a question really quick. So it was really impressive to hear that you passed all of those exams within a short period of time. For myself, I kind of want to go down the investment path as well. So I'm eventually going to be looking at the Series 7. Can you tell me a little bit? How hard was it?
Sure. So I will tell people, so just like with anything, here's my recommendation with any of these tests, whether that's Series 7, 63, 65, CFP. I definitely would, there is learning the material, right? But there's also being tested on the material. I would definitely take a review course or prep course, because the part of the Series 7, so the content, because remember, I was undergrad finance, the part about options, I took a whole class on options. That wasn't hard for me. However, what was hard is the way they test the material. So I can be really concrete. There may be a question, and underneath the question, there's 1, there's 2, and then there's 3. So choice A would be only 1, or 2 and 3, or 1, 2, and 3. So my recommendation is definitely take a review course. Other recommendation is do a lot of practice questions. And I know this is old school, but even do flashcards. Like you can even, when you're with friends, out and about, like the flashcards, you can even, that is really helpful, because you want to be able to recall this on the fly. I think that you definitely can pass it. You just like with anything, you have to have a plan and break it down, because it is a lot of material. But just break it down. Yes, it was a lot. Now, when I think about it, I'm like, gosh, that was a lot. That is pretty impressive. But I also know I didn't have a lot of financial pressure. I was getting 100% pay because I cashed out my leave from my job, and my only job was to study, take care of my kid, and work out. That's all I had to do. I didn't have to worry about homework. Not that taking care of kids isn't hard, but what you get what I mean. I didn't have to write papers. I didn't have to go to class. I did have to take care of my kids. They were little, 3 and 6, and I made sure that I got my workout in to stay sharp. But so that would be my recommendation. Don't try to do them all at once. So I wasn't studying for all 4 tests at once. I took life and health first, because that was pretty easy, and then some people well, you should take the hardest test first. To be honest, I probably would have taken the hardest test first, but there's a window in which you can take that test, and I didn't get the window in time, so that's why I took life and health first. But there's different ways. Some people say, what you want to do is you want to get the hardest test out of the way. One could make that argument. I think that of those 4 tests, I did save the hardest for last, because we have to be able to pass all 4 tests to, to have that employment offer extended to us. So I felt like if I could say, hey, 3 down, 1 more to go. So yeah, that was my strategy.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I had a question. How are you? So, the school offered a challenge, and it was basically how a study from Northwestern Mutual said that 1.25 million is a good number for you to retire. So how would you make that last, starting at the age of 65 and say you live for like 25 years? In your opinion, say you just have a normal, like you're just a normal guy, so all your expenses.
Sure. So I got my phone out here, not because I'm texting, I'm doing calculations. So Northwestern Mutual said 1.25, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not going to use the 4% rule. I'm going to say 3%. So 3% of 1.25 million is $37,500. Okay. And if you divide that by 25, that's $1,500 a month. I'm also going to do math where it's 4% of 1.25 million, which is 50 grand a year. And you divide that by 12. I'm not by 12. Sorry. So sorry. So 3% of 1.25 million is 37,500 a year. And if you divide that by 12, so I'm not using my HP 12, so I'm just got the iPhone out. So 1.25 million times 3% is $37,500 per year. And then you divide that by 12. Sorry about that. That is 3,125. So I want you to write that number down. Then I'm also going to do 4% just to show you. So 4% of 1.25 million is 50 grand. 50 grand divided by 12 is $4,166. I tend to say the 3% just because I want to be a little bit more conservative. So for somebody who is 65, I said a 25-year life expectancy because I'm consistent with what the study was saying. That takes someone to 90. I might even do life expectancy of 95. I know they said 25, but just to be on the conservative side. So how would I invest that? I think that it's important to have some money for the liquidity bucket. If somebody is retiring at 65 and they need money within the next 3 to 5 years, that some of that money should be in short-term money market, cash, treasuries, intermediate growth and income, and the last growth. So like buckets. If the client was risk averse and maybe not comfortable investing as much, this is where perhaps, having some money with protected growth in an annuity may make sense. So I would also, if someone's 65, I would look at all the different levers. So perhaps you look at Social Security planning, right? I'd also look at their expenses, and I try to match core essential expenses with sustainable, predictable income. I didn't say fixed expenses because sometimes people get like a little bit stuck on this. Like my electric bill changes. Okay, it's not a fixed expense. It's a core essential expense. So I try to match the core essential expenses with the sustainable sources of income, which would be Social Security and pension, meaning no matter what, they're coming in. Then I match lifestyle expenses or variable expenses with the investments. And notice I don't say discretionary. I don't like to take myself so seriously. But some people may think golf is discretionary. And for other people, it may be essential. People like me, I know I could drink too much coffee. Don't tell me that coffee is discretionary. It's essential for me to be upbeat, focused, and so forth. So that's how I would do that. And if somebody is a little bit nervous, that's when you do financial planning. See, I think a lot of people who just sell product get in trouble for selling an annuity with no context behind it because they have high fees, they're illiquid. But if you're doing financial planning, you're solving for that need. And the client does need to have another source of sustainable, predictable income to help address longevity risk or market risk, then an annuity can, I didn't say will, can make sense. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that was perfect.
Thank you.
Any last minute questions? Anybody? Person? Okay, well, I guess that's all we have. Thank you so much, Rita, for coming in and speaking to us today.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions, thank you so much, Leanne, for the question. If any of you have questions, seriously, I put myself out there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to ask your questions. Maybe it didn't come up. Maybe you didn't think about it during the presentation. Maybe you didn't want other people to hear your question. You know, you can message me on LinkedIn. And that's also how you put into practice what you learned today.
Yeah, definitely. We should all be doing that with all our speakers together. So
absolutely. So I hope that you found value in this and you get to practice what you preach, because this is a safe environment. I'm just here speaking to you. There's no judgment, so you can try it and message me. You know, even if you didn't like the presentation, you don't have to tell me it was a great presentation. But you can say, you know, just reach out. So test and see. But thank you so much.
thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night, Rita.
Thank you.
Stay up behind. We have some announcements to make.